Morning, everyone, and welcome to our social media and social learning webinar. My name's Laura Lichtensteiger, and I'm a marketing manager here at Cengage. I'll be hosting our discussion this morning, working alongside my colleague Stuart.
Hi there, my name's Stuart Webster. I'm the Digital Solutions Manager here at Cengage, and as Laura said, I'll be supporting her this morning with the webinar. And before we get started, and just so you're familiar with the webinar tool that we're using, I just want to run through a few things. So on your screen right now, you should be able to see our opening slide in the main pane. So we'll be posting slides and content there throughout the webinar. We'll also be putting up poll questions. So this is going to be an interactive webinar, and we need you to contribute as much as possible. So you will see poll questions appearing there throughout the webinar. Slightly below that pane, you'll see the chat box, and Roxanne, who is our chat moderator today, has already posted a comment in there for you. And we're going to use the chat room a lot today. So if you could post a hi or a hello, just so we know you found the chat room, that would help a lot. Morning, Delphine. There's
There we
Russell.
go.
Morning, Russell and Suzanne. Oh, I was worried there. I thought you couldn't hear
Yeah,
us. That was all a bit worrying. Marvelous. So lots of people jumping in. So yeah, there's our chat room, and we're going to use that throughout the session. So chat room, lots, some poll questions going on. We are recording the session, so we'll share the recording with you later, and that will allow you to see and hear everything Laura and I talk about this morning, as well as be able to go back over the chat conversation if there are points or ideas that you want to go back on. And that's kind of us ready to go. So Laura, I will hand back to you.
right. So just before we do get started, as most of you will know, you can receive a certificate from us for attending the whole session today. If you could just let us know in the chat room quickly if you would like to receive one of those, and we'll get that all sorted after we've finished. That would be great. We've got a short agenda just to have a quick overview of what we'll be talking about, some of the questions we hope to be addressing through the poll questions and through discussion with you about how you are learning, how you're using or how you're looking to use social media. And I also just very quickly want to have a little bit of an overview about why we're talking about this. So we've looked at a little bit of research, which has kind of driven this discussion. And when we're talking to our customers about digital products, so lecturers and professors like yourselves who are using digital solutions in their teaching, we know that some of the features which we try and focus on are those which really improve communication, interaction, and different ways of collaborating between and with your students, which really kind of links quite well with social media. So we know that the learning space is changing. It's more and more fluid every day. Students are more connected. They are engaging with content on the go all the time. And it's really that which has led us to host this webinar today, and to look at how we can utilize that. So that's kind of a little bit of background. And to get our conversation started, I'd like to look at our first poll question, which is a really simple way into it. We'd just like to know how, if you feel social media has a role to play in your course at the moment. So we're using it or not, of whether you think it's got a place. Stuart's put that one up now, so if you could just take a few seconds to answer that first question, and then we'll have a look at the results and start a bit of a discussion.
Cool, thank you, Laura. Yeah, there's a few of you started to vote. There's a couple more. So if you haven't taken your opportunity to vote on the poll question, please jump in now. We don't always get all of the ideas that people are looking for in our poll question answers. So if you've got any suggestions or things thoughts that you have on that question that aren't covered in our poll question, please feel free to jump into the chat room and add comments there along with voting in the poll. So I'm going to leave it for a few more seconds, just to let a few more people jump in and vote. So if you haven't taken the opportunity to vote yet, please do. Cool. So here we go. Let more people jump in. Oh, we've just had somebody new join the call, so we'll give them an opportunity to vote as well. Oh, and another one. Oh, there are many people still joining the call. Okay, so I'm going to close, and I'm going to close that one and share the voting. So you should be able to see it on your screens about now.
Great. Yeah, I can see that one, Stuart. So throughout our chat today, we'll probably be referring a little bit to a session which we ran yesterday. It's the same session, just with different attendees. And I'd like to kind of compare how we looked at the results there to really give kind of a snapshot of how social media is being used in education at the moment. So looking at this first question, it's really interesting to see that quite a few more of you joining us today feel that it does have a role to play as a learning tool or a resource to actually work with your students within their teaching and their learning. Because yesterday there was a bit more of an even split between those who didn't think it had a role to play at all, or those who saw it more as just you know, a communication tool to keep in touch about lectures and things like that. I don't think we had anyone, Stuart, who thought it had something to contribute to assessment in this first poll.
No, not in the first poll yesterday, and I'm interested by that. So if you are the person who, or people, I'm not sure how it was, people who said as part of assessment and you want to share how you're using that in the chat room or in what context that's used, we'd be really interested to hear about that.
Definitely. So when we move on in a little while to our next question, we're going to look more in detail about how you're using it. But to kind of kick us off, if there's anyone who would like to put something in the chat about if you've answered yes, different ways that you're using it, just to kind of start us off in pooling some ideas on how to use social media.
Okay, and we've got a first comment there. So Ariana says she's using social media, YouTube as a way of distributing video material to her students' presentations to her students. It doesn't add up to 100% because not everybody chose to vote, and it just shows the percentage of people who voted. Somebody was asking a question about why it doesn't add up to 100%. So, and YouTube's certainly a way to do that. Given some of the comments we had yesterday, Ariana, with your YouTube videos, do you allow students to comment or ask questions on those videos, or do you simply use it a way of distributing video content to your students?
Oh, so yeah, so the presentations are an assessment, not for distribution. So doing them and uploading them are an assessment, or you do them as an assessment and then upload them afterwards. That would be interesting to know. And also picking up on Kat's comment there about using Facebook to share material and ideas. Something we really talked about a lot yesterday was whether that is driven by yourselves as lecturers or by your students going away and setting up groups to share information. Okay, that makes a lot of sense about the module being a digital marketing module. So, of course, YouTube has a role to play there.
Okay, and Ellie was saying they regularly use YouTube for supportive material. So something that was driven by students. That's interesting. And Kat, is that that use of Facebook, do you create the groups and introduce and invite your students to join them, or is it something that's still motivated and managed by them? Because we saw yesterday many people talking about non-structured use of Facebook groups just to share material, but generally that was motivated and driven by students rather than instructors driving that. Create groups, they can control.
Okay.
Great, thank you for that. So certainly that's slightly different from some of the messages we saw yesterday, and I guess gives it more structure and more credibility as a resource when it's being created by the instructor rather than student-driven groups.
Definitely. I think that's a really interesting intro to how a few of you are using different bits of social media. So if we could have a look at our next poll question, that will kind of lead us to talk about it in a little bit more detail. Just to
Yeah.
give you a little bit of background on this question, you should be able to see it on your screens now. We know that what you're doing won't necessarily fall neatly into one of these answers, but please do just choose the one which sounds best to you and add any comments into the chat group. We tried to kind of group the answers by the level of use of social media. So the first one is kind of the basic level of just distributing learning resources and information. The second one, encouraging students to contribute to that, so a bit more of a two-way use of social media. And then the third option there for group or collaborative work, so really using it to create something new, just to give you a bit of background. But please do add any comments you've got about any of those answers, and we'll have a look at the results in a few moments.
Okay, and whilst we wait for people to vote, there's a couple of interesting pieces appearing in chat room, Laura. Dr. Smith talked about students using Facebook groups, and Russell was talking about blogs which learners have created themselves. And I just wonder if was that through the use of the LMS, Russell, or are they using regular blogging tools to do that? And Kat came back and said that they looked at wikis and blogs, but students found Facebook a quicker way using. Maybe, Kat, you could expand on what you mean by quicker. Is that about creating those groups and sharing that information rather than having to learn a new tool?
I think it's really interesting, Stuart, just to pick up on what those things you've highlighted. Some of the other sessions we've been running have been on kind of engagement and motivation. So it's good to see from a different perspective, students doing things on their own, having the impetus to make these groups and then run with them. It's a really kind of different way of looking at how they interact with their course. Maybe it's because they are more familiar with social media tools and they're already using them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So any of you who may have joined us last week, so Laura and I ran a couple of webinars last week on student motivation. And here we're hearing so many great stories, and we did yesterday about students being motivated to create groups and share information and support each other and find ways that work for them. And we're certainly seeing some of that here. And I think, Kat, you've come back kindly and answered and talked about the use of phones as a way of being able to access this information, and that's better done for students through some of the social platforms rather than using Blackboard or Moodle, which maybe don't integrate as well on their mobile devices. And I think it shows how complex this discussion is. So although there are many different tools out there, it's not just are the tools suitable, but do they work on the devices that the students are using and the kind of platforms that they want to use. And whilst the LMS in the institution is the way that many academics might choose to, or a place that they might want to host it, does that work from your student's perspective? And it's certainly challenging. Really less clicks, deeper student engagement. Yeah, Dr. Smith there coming in and supporting Kat's argument. I would tend to agree that from my experience, and I travel throughout Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, visiting students at a whole host of institutions, that ease of access is certainly reduces the barriers to students engaging with any of these online tools. Hey.
Do you want to finish
Oh, I
round?
closed out. Sorry
Yep,
about
close
that.
that one more
Just
time.
me
That's
sat here
okay.
looking at the show, looking at the results.
There we go. Okay, so quite an even split there in the different ways that it's being used. But I think what we're seeing in the chat room and also from our chats yesterday is that it's just it's very broad and it doesn't kind of the use of it doesn't fit just into one category at all. I just wanted to quickly pick up on the comment about that the differentiating between the private and academic use, because that's something
Yeah.
we talked about quite a bit yesterday as well. And kind of bringing the social media into kind of the learning space, making it a bit more trackable, but keeping it kind of professional and monitored, and something that you've got a bit more control of as opposed to social media kind of out in the big wide world. And that's something we might be able to look at later in one of our digital solutions if that's something you'd like to see.
Yeah, and there was a few pieces there. Teachers never switch off. That's definitely true. I can validate that just from my email inbox. You guys never switch off. And Facebook has examples of authentic language. Okay. Cool. So there's lots of exciting stuff there. So one of the things Laura just mentioned there, and maybe of interest to you, is as a company, we certainly recognise lots of the challenges you talked about and people talked about yesterday. And somebody really picked up on it well there was um, how you use social tools. You get the benefits of mobile applications and all the great investment that people like Twitter and Facebook and even LinkedIn with their in chat have made into making um, the mobile phone the device it is and as accessible it is, but still being able to have that delineation and management of students' engagement and interaction with these tools. One of the tools Cengage uses, and I'm just going to pop it up on the screen quickly now. You guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Struggle to see what you know. Is a tool called ConnectYard. Now, the value ConnectYard brings is that it allows you as teaching faculty to be able to create discussions with students and introduce students or your class of students to a discussion, allow them to start their own discussions, but manage that in a safe environment. So the Connect Yard is also is the environment itself. So that's where all of the discussions go on. That's where you manage those discussions. But students on an individual basis can make that decision about whether they then want to link their Connect Yard to their Facebook account, to their Twitter account, to their cell phone number, to in chat within LinkedIn. So they have a decision about where do they find out about these discussions, where do notifications that a discussion is going on and that's being started by their lecturer, and they make that decision about tools. So you're starting to break down the concerns of that barrier between social and academic and teaching. Also, more importantly, is none of the conversations that are going on, whether they choose to use Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it happens to be, appear in their public thread. So it's a private discussion that they can see through their Facebook account, through their Twitter account, through their SMS number, and they can engage in that discussion on those platforms, but none of it becomes public. So from a student's perspective, it doesn't become onerous or distracting to their private conversations that are going on. From a faculty or institution perspective, it allows you to really be confident that students are having the opportunity to use those mobile devices, to use the functionality that's there, whilst having a private conversation in the sense of it's only within the people who are on your course or people that you've invited to your Connect Yard. So it kind of breaks those barriers down. It gives you much more control, much more visibility about the discussions, much more ability to manage those discussions whilst allowing your students and you to engage in those discussions using the platforms and the tools that you find most useful. Any comments or questions at the moment about that, because I don't want to hang on this for too long. I just thought it kind of covered some of the pieces that people have been discussing so far. So I can't see all of the chat room rules. So was there any questions or anything in the chat room around the functionality
Just
on
that,
ConnectYard?
not on our functionality. I know Kat picked up on how the links are useful because you harness notification functionality. So it's useful to tap into something which students are using. It gives them that ability to remind students to kind of check in and engage with what you're asking them to do using something where they're already getting notifications. And I think that's kind of the
Absolutely, yeah.
crux of the tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that ability for a discussion to be happening in a safe, in a curated, private environment, but students to be notified about that discussion and things that are going on in the discussion on the platforms that they're using. One of the other nice features, and this came up yesterday and hasn't come up so much today, was about the ability to very quickly download analytics on how much individual students or groups of students have been engaging in discussions. So if you want to start a group discussion amongst a specific group of students, for group work, you could create a group within the ConnectYard tool. The students can still engage with their platforms, but you can have multiple groups running at any one time and be able to very quickly see analytical data about what discussions are they having, how much are people contributing. And you can see on my screen now here, we've got trending topics. So as an instructor, you can see keywords or phrases that are being picked up as part of the discussions that your students are having. So it kind of gives you a way of having the discussions that you're having now, and still making use of some of the platforms or many of the platforms that are already being used, but a much more curated and secure environment, in the sense of knowing who's part of that discussion, who you're inviting into it, and being able to see who's engaging in those conversations. Which for many institutions and depending on the part of the world you're in, having that safety of being able to see who's in the discussion, who's contributing, who invited them into that discussion, that's an important feature for many people. So if you are interested in ConnectYard and looking for something that's slightly more structured but still makes use of those tools, and you certainly quite free to get in touch with me, and we'll share all our contact details later. Or if you know who your local Cengage contact is, you can contact them as well.
Great.
Any other
Thank you
questions
very
in the chat
much,
room
Stuart.
at the moment? That's
Um,
okay.
Nope, the chat's looking good. We've had a question about whether there's any research. So when we were structuring this session, I did look into some literature reviews, and there's definitely been some research into not just how social media can be used, but also the student perception of it, which has been shown to be quite important in that if they feel that it could enhance their learning experience, um, then that can make them more engaged, and it can improve motivation because of engagement. So it's kind of all these factors work together, basically. But also what came out of looking at some research and also our discussion yesterday is the acknowledgement that whilst it has lots of aspects which could have a really positive impact on teaching and learning for students, there's also some concerns about whether you're kind of encroaching on their kind of private social life, and whether it can be a bit distracting if they are always on their social media. So I think that leads us nicely into our last poll question. We've only got a few more minutes with you, so we'd just like to get your opinion on whether you feel that social media has a role to play in terms of adding more value. We've talked a bit about the different ways that you use it at the moment in terms of assessment, Facebook groups, YouTube videos. There's so many options. And it hasn't come up actually that much today about it being a distraction, but it was definitely a real concern for some of the lecturers that we spoke to yesterday. So if you could just take a few seconds just to answer our last poll question, we thought that would be a nice way to round up our chat today. Just seeing Kat's comment there.
Yes, I love Kat's most recent comment. I And I'm sure that's something that's familiar to everybody in the discussion today, Kat. It's a fair point. And as Laura said, I think I would be seeing lots of maybes appearing. So if maybe's there and you have a feeling about how to manage that social media, that distraction, and how to get the best from social media, whilst managing the distraction effect, it would be good to hear what people are doing. Clearly, for Kat,
Yeah,
it's about standing over the students' shoulders.
managing it is really important. So just picking up on Dr. Smith's comment there, that to him it only becomes a distraction if we let it become a distraction. And I think that does tap into something we've seen, is that it does mean that you've then got something else to manage, and you do need to try and keep control over it. Something that we feel that looking at the Connect Yard, that's how we talked around that yesterday, is that you have that control a bit more over that environment, and you can kind of moderate it a bit more. So it becomes a bit more focused, and it's part of their learning and potentially their assessment as well. So they have a bit more structure as to why and how they're using social media. Right, so
Oh,
basically what Kat just said about there being a clear goal or benefit to using it.
yeah, and Nikki as well talked about the age of the learners and not everybody uses social media, more with adults. And I think that's a good point. I think also looking at whether you've got whether you're holding campus-based traditional lectures where students are in a room with you and they've got their laptops out and they become distracted, against distance learning modules where that distraction effect is a slightly different thing, and therefore maybe social tools actually bring an engagement level rather than becoming a distraction, more than in a more traditional campus-based environment. So I think as we see a growth in distance learning, possibly the social tools have a different value proposition there.
And also, just to pick up on Kat's comment about not being too concerned about it, that is something where maybe we don't need to be too concerned about the blurring between their personal and kind of academic social media use, because ultimately, as we were talking about yesterday, students are going to need to know how to kind of operate in a world where social media is really important for their professional lives in the future, in terms of having a LinkedIn profile, knowing how to communicate with people. So it's already playing a role in their academic and their personal lives. So um, I think it's something that you need to harness as opposed to try and stop possibly.
Yeah, and I think there was I think it was Russell's last comment, when it's used for a specific purpose. Again, it's coming back to purpose and reason for using the social tool rather
Yeah,
than it
definitely.
just being there, but for the sake of it. And I think you were right, Laura. And social tools, we know all students have them, and in different regions it's different tools. So it might not always be Facebook, or it might not always be Twitter, but there's going to be a platform of some description that your students are using, and some of the responsibility, I guess, comes down to them making um, adult decisions about when and where is appropriate to use them. In the same way that, as many of you have said, um, it is your responsibility to make sure, if you are going to use social tools in your courses, that that is done in an appropriate goal-led way. So I think there are both sides there, and I think this came up a lot in our last webinar, is where that line is drawn between the responsibility of teachers, instructors,
Yeah,
academics to take responsibility for things, and on the flip side for students to take some responsibility as well.
of course. I think it's a discussion that we could continue for a long time, and I really, really appreciate everyone's comments and contributions today. I think we've shared some really useful ideas and opinions on how to manage social media in education going forward. Um, so I'd just like to follow up with a few little bits about what's next. So if it'd be really helpful to make sure that if we do send you anything, we're sending you the most helpful and relevant information. So if you could pop what your learning management system is in the chat room. I know we've already had Moodle and Blackboard mentioned a couple of times. That'd be really helpful to help us help you. we will be sending the recording out so that you can access this again and have another look at some of the things we've been looking at. And of course, if you've any more questions at all, please do get in touch. Drop a message in the chat room and Roxanne will help you out, or you can email Stuart directly and he'll be more than happy to help you. But really, I'd just like to say a really big thank you for contributing today. I think it's been a really, really interesting discussion and something that we will go on to build on. We've got another webinar in a couple of weeks' time on using digital resources. Please join us for that one as well if you're interested. And yeah, we hope to see you again soon. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'd just like to reiterate that. So thank you all for your time. Appreciate you're all busy. And as Laura said, there's now a big yellow circle around my email address. So if you do want to get in touch, please don't hesitate to drop me an email. Either I will reach out to you or one of your local Cengage representatives will, and we'll make sure that they're aware of the conversations that you've been having with us. So thank you all for your time. I'm going to leave the chat room open for a little while if you want to add any final comments. But thank you from me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.